The Messiah is coming soon. Yes, I am warring with the Persian. When the missiles come on, everywhere I go. I see, I see, he's a hero. I see, because we the heroes. Bahashem Yeshaya. Bahashem Yeshaya. Bahashem Yeshaya. Oh, praise to the Most High. Oh, praise to the Most High. I am that I am. The God that's with the Red Sea. Israel walked on dry land. Exodus 3:13. All the way to verse 15. The Most High's holy name. We shall not profane. The Israelites spoke Hebrew. I am turned into a higher. There's no James in Hebrew. It's not Jesus, it's Yeshaya. The Bible is a record that shows how we got to hate the rest of the minorities. We the same family. I'm a son of Levi and my Lord is from Judah. I was a young boy and I married a young queen from Judah. Deuteronomy 28:68. Slave ships and slave ships. Revelation 21. I see Israel. I see because we the neighbors. I see because we the heroes. Bahashem Yeshaya. Bahashem Yeshaya. Bahashem Yeshaya.
Good evening, good evening, good evening. This is Brother Uriah from the Hebrew Israelite Home Bible Study Group. Still here in Pensacola, Florida. Praise Yah, we're still here. Despite the storms and the COVID-19, we're still here. Fighting a good fight. Okay, so tonight we're going to be tackling part 3 regarding the seat of Moses and the 613 laws that we have been told are in the Mosaic Law. There are some really important questions that I would like to present and hopefully present answers that you will find acceptable. So let's get started on today's lesson. Tonight's scripture is going to be taken from Matthew chapter 23 verses 1 through 4, because we're going to be continuing on with this question about the seat of Moses, and did Yahusha HaMashiach tell his followers to follow these Pharisees, these scribes, and these Sadducees, and these rabbis who were ordering our people to obey laws that they made, laws that we learned of last lesson were called the Takanot and the Ma'asim, that they were man-made laws. So we're doing a quick review of that, and then we're going to be taking up the main theme, which is the identity and the background of these supposed 613 laws of Moses. Why? Because, one, how do you know that there are 613 laws? Have you counted them? I haven't. So how do we know that there's really 613 laws? We've been told that. Does that make it true? Absolutely not. We've been told all kinds of things, right? That doesn't make it true. So let's get into these scriptures. Let's get into the historical evidence and the historical documents that we have to either prove or disprove the existence of these 613 laws of Moses. Because I definitely want to know, are there really 613? I want to know who counted them. I want to know where they came from. And I hope you do too. The more correct answers we get, the sooner that we're all going to come together into that final 1/3 that's going to make it. Because what we're doing, what? We're following truth, not tradition. So let's get started. I want to begin this lesson by introducing you to a man known as Erasmus. His full name was Desiderius Erasmus. He lived between the years of 1469 and 1536. He was a Dutch Catholic priest and translator of the Hebrew Israelite scriptures into what became known as the Textus Receptus, or the received text. Written in Greek, it is from this source material that later European language translations are derived, most notably the New Testament scriptures of the KJV and the NIV. Recall from last lesson that we indicated that it was from the Textus Receptus that the translators used to create the New Testament of the King James Bible. And we focused in on Matthew 23, particularly verses 1 through 4. Okay, where we read, "Then spoke Jesus to the multitude and to his disciples, saying, The scribes and the Pharisees sit in Moses' seat. All therefore whatsoever they bid you observe, that observe and do. But do not ye after their works, for they say and they do not." Now here we show that there's certain key words and phrases where they're coming from the Greek in that translation. We saw that Jesus in the KJV is coming from the Greek Textus Receptus, known as Jesus. Here he's known as Jesus. In verse 2, we picked up on the phrase the scribes and the Pharisees. And here we're showing where that is coming from in its source, again in the Textus Receptus. And in the Greek, that is pronounced roughly grammatus kai pharisaios, the scribes and the Pharisees. And in verse 3, we saw where it says, "All therefore whatsoever they bid you observe, that observe and do." But we saw and we picked up on the fact that this they, the word they in the English, correspond to this verse in the Textus Receptus, which is pronounced ipa. Okay, now here's where the issue is, because in the translation using the Greek Textus Receptus, this word ipa is translated they, and we saw that when it refers to they, it is referring to they, the scribes and the Pharisees. Now, in contrast to the Textus Receptus written in Greek, I showed you two sources, the Hebrew Gospel of Matthew by George Howard and the Hebrew Yeshua versus the Greek Jesus by Dr. Nehemiah Gordon. And these two served as witnesses for us. George Howard's The Hebrew Gospel of Matthew provided the legible Hebrew Matthew chapter 23, where Dr. Nehemiah Gordon provided the translation. And the third witness to this was of the what was known as Shem Tov. That Shem Tov, that ancient rather not ancient, but old, very old copy of the Gospel of Matthew written in Hebrew. And here is that third witness known as Shem Tov. Recall that Shem Tov was a man that lived during the 14th century, that he was a 14th century Jewish author of the book known as Ibn Bohan, the Touchstone. And within this book, there was a copy of a Hebrew Gospel of Matthew, dating back to the 8th century AD, and possibly even earlier. Some scholars date this source back to the 5th century AD. So clearly this Shem Tov, this Hebrew Gospel of Matthew, predates Erasmus's Greek New Testament, which was published in 1516. Here we're looking at the Hebrew Gospel of Matthew as it was recorded in the book Shem Tov. Here we're looking at the 22nd and the 23rd chapters. Now where that word is highlighted, that's in the 23rd chapter, which is where we're going to focus on. And that word that is highlighted is the Hebrew word Yomar. Yomar, spelled Yod, Aleph, Mem, Resh. This is key in understanding the significance of this lesson, that this word Yomar is prevalent in the Hebrew Gospel of Matthew, but not in the Greek translation by Erasmus. Here we're going to focus in on that third verse of chapter 23 of the Hebrew Gospel of Matthew. This translation is provided by Dr. Nehemiah Gordon, and it's translated as follows, starting with verse 2. The Pharisees and sages sit upon the seat of Moses. Verse 3. Therefore, all that he says to you diligently do, but according to their reforms and their precedents do not do, because they talk, but they do not do. Professor Gordon's comment follows, which says, in the Hebrew Matthew, Yeshua is telling his disciples not to obey the Pharisees. If their claim to authority, that is the scribes and the Pharisees, if their claim to authority is that they sit in Moses' seat, then they should diligently do as Moses said. So we see that this is strikingly different from the translation provided by the Greek Erasmus Textus Receptus. So according to the Hebrew Gospel of Matthew, Matthew 23 verses 1 through 3 would read as follows. Then Yeshua spoke to the people and to his disciples. The Pharisees and sages sit upon the seat of Moses. Therefore, all that he says to you diligently do, but according to their reforms and their precedents do not do, because they talk, but they do not do. So when verse 4 is referring to, let's read it. For they, now we know when it says they, now they're talking about the scribes and the Pharisees. For they, the scribes and the Pharisees, bind heavy burdens. What were the heavy burdens that they were referring to? That's referring to these reforms, these takanot, that he's telling you not to obey. For they bind heavy burdens and grievous to be borne. What is grievous to be borne? These Takanat and these Ma'asim, the reformed and these presidents. For they bind heavy burdens and grievous to be borne, and lay them on men's shoulders, but they themselves will not move them with one of their fingers. Now this makes absolute sense. Remember all of those negative acts that we went through earlier of these scribes and Pharisees, and we asked the question, why would the Messiah tell you to obey these people while he's condemning them at the same time? Why would he tell us to obey the ones that he is condemning? Because he didn't. He's not telling us to obey the scribes and the Pharisees. He's telling us to obey Moses. Moses. And when verse 4 refers to the heavy burdens that are grievous, what is he referring to? The reforms, these made up laws, these laws that are not the laws of Moses, these precedents that they just decide to add to the law. That's what's heavy. That's what's grievous to the people. Not the law of Moses. So clearly you can see when we go to the Matthew gospel, we get an entirely different result, don't we? When we use these Gentiles translation, we get corruption. Something's not right. Now someone might say, well, the Matthew gospel is corrupt. Well, but which one makes sense? Why would he tell us to obey those who he condemns? Why would he give you the law and then tell you, well, I come with some new law, a new set of laws? We don't go by the laws of Moses anymore. But yet the scripture tells us that the Father and the Son are one, doesn't it? He says, if you've known the one, you've known the other. Again, that doesn't make any sense. The corruption by these Gentiles. And to this, we then add 1 John 5, verses 2 and 3, line upon line, precept upon precept. 1 John chapter 5, verses 2 and 3. By this we know that we love the children of Yahuwah when we love Yahuwah and keep his commandments. For this is the love of Yahuwah, that we keep his commandments, and his commandments are not grievous. So therefore, when we are speaking to these heavy burdens that are grievous, how could that possibly be the commandments of the Most High when he's telling us right here that his commandments are not grievous? He's not referring to his commandments, his Mosaic Laws in Matthew 23, verse 4. He's talking about those takanot and the ma'asim, those man-made laws of the scribes and the Pharisees, not the Mosaic law. And again, line upon line, precept upon precept, represents Romans chapter 7, verses 12 and 13, which reads as follows. Wherefore the law is holy, and the commandment holy, and just, and good. Was then that which is good made death unto me? Yahuwah forbid, but sin, that it might appear sin, working death in me by that which is good, that sin by the commandment might become exceedingly sinful. Here is very clear that the law is holy, the commandment holy, just and good. So therefore, How could anybody reasonably, knowing this information, conclude that the Mosaic Laws are done away with, that they're gone, they're not to be used anymore, when it says that the law is holy, the law is just and good, and then goes on to show us that we would not even understand what sin was it not for the existence of the law, contrasting that which we are doing with that which the Most High wants us to do. Now, focusing in on the purpose of this particular lesson, we address these two questions. What are these 613 laws of Moses? What are they? Can you name them? Can any one of us name them? Most of us can't name the 10 Commandments, much less 613 laws of Moses. And the second question is, where did these 613 laws come from? This is what we're going to be addressing next. Let's continue on with Matthew 23, verses 5 through 12. But all their works they do for to be seen of men. They make broad their phylacteries and enlarge the borders of their garments. Now, who's the they here? When it says all their works they do, who is it referring to? We know that this is referring to the scribes and the Pharisees. They are the ones that are seeking to be seen of men. They are the ones that broaden their phylacteries. They are the ones that enlarge the borders of their garments. Reminds you of a few folks out here in the modern world, don't they? Verse 6, and love the uppermost rooms at feasts, and the chief seats in the synagogues, and greetings in the markets, to be called of men, Rabbi, Rabbi. Verse 8, but be not ye called Rabbi, for one is your master, even Christ, and all ye are brethren. Pay particular attention to this verse 7 and 8 with the use of this word Rabbi. Verse 7 again. And greetings in the market, and to be called of men, Rabbi, Rabbi. But be not ye called Rabbi, for one is your master. Here, the Messiah is telling us very clearly not to be called Rabbi. Well, how do you become called Rabbi? You become to be called Rabbi by joining in with them. You join with them. You follow their teachings. You do as they do. And the men can reach a certain status where they are referred to as Rabbi. But here the scripture is clearly telling you not to be called Rabbi, which is the same as telling you not to join them, not to follow them, not to be influenced by them. And we're going to see how important this is later on. And in verse 9, and call no man your father on earth, for one is your Father, which is in heaven. Well, what does this say about the Roman Catholic Church? What do they call these men who they identify as priests of the Roman Catholic Church? Do they not refer to them as Father Joseph, Father Benjamin, or some other name that they have given themselves? But not only that, the women, the nuns. The nuns are called Mother Anastasia, Mother Teresa. Some of you heard these terms before, and you know that it's true. Clearly a violation of scriptures. Verse 10, neither be ye called masters, for one is your master, even Christ, Yahusha HaMashiach. He is our master, and none other. Verse 11, but he that is greatest among you shall be your servant, and whosoever shall exalt himself shall be abased, and he that shall humble himself shall be exalted. Now apply that to a few folks that you know, even in the Hebrew Israelite community, that exalt themselves. Ask yourself, do you see them as your servant? Are they truly serving you? Have they humbled and abased themselves? Would they wash your feet, for example? Verse 13. But woe unto you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, for ye shut up the kingdom of heaven against men. For ye neither go in yourselves, neither suffer you them that are entering to go in. Here the Messiah is telling his people not to follow the teachings of those that call themselves rabbis, scribes, and Pharisees. And that would include their takanot and the ma'asim, their man-made laws. This is what he's telling you not to follow. Their takanot, their ma'asim, their man-made laws. And I suspect that this is where we are going to find these 613 laws. So let's continue down this rabbit hole looking for the source of these 613 laws.
You're traveling to another dimension. A dimension not only of sight and sound, but of mind. A journey into a wondrous land whose boundaries are that of imagination. Your next stop.
Rabbinic Judaism. Classical Rabbinic Judaism has two categories of laws according to Talmud. The laws believed revealed by the Most High to the Hebrew Israelites at Mount Sinai as written in the Pentateuch, the written law. The other category are the laws believed to be of human origin, but divinely inspired, including rabbinic decrees, interpretations, customs, the oral law, etc. It is the second category of human origin that are these man-made laws that we are addressing in Matthew 23 and 4. These are the laws that the Messiah is telling us not to obey, these rabbinic decrees and these rabbinic interpretations and customs. These are these laws that are burdensome and grievous. These are these man-made laws that Matthew 23 of the Hebrew Gospel identifies as the takanot and the ma'asim. According to the Talmud, there are 613 mitzvot, or commandments, in the Torah. In Hebrew, these are known as the Taryag mitzvot. There are said to be 248 positive mitzvot and 365 negative mitzvot given in the Talmud. The positive commandments require an action to be performed which are said to bring a person closer to God. The negative commandments forbid a specific action, Thus, violations create distance between that person and God. During the medieval period, which you need to understand is a period of time relative to Europe, not the world, Jewish law was classified by such works as Rabbi Maimonides. Now, go back in your mind on what we've just covered. What did the Messiah just tell us about those that call themselves rabbi? Recall Matthew 23:8, where it says, "But be not ye called rabbi, for one is your master, even Christ, and all ye are brethren." So this man who was called Rabbi Maimonides fits directly into this scripture that tells us not to be one like him. Do not be a rabbi. So this Rabbi Maimonides is representing that which the Messiah is telling us to stay away from. So let's go in a little further into this rabbit hole and see what this Rabbi Maimonides is all about. Here we see a likeness of this man called Maimonides. Moses ben Maimon, commonly known as Maimonides, and also referred to by the acronym Rambam, was a medieval Sephardic rabbi and Jewish philosopher. Keep that in mind. Sephardic rabbi. This is going to be important as we go forward. Sephardic rabbi, who became one of the most prolific and influential Talmud Torah scholars of the Middle Ages. In his time, he was also a preeminent astronomer and physician, serving as the personal physician of Saladin. Now, I find it awfully strange that this Rabbi Maimonides, Jewish fella, was the personal physician of the great Muslim leader Saladin. Saladin was a Muslim. He called on the name of Allah. He did not call on the name of Yah. He called on Allah. But yet this Rabbi Maimonides was his personal physician. Now recall earlier I said to remember that this man Maimonides is described as a Sephardic rabbi philosopher. We have seen already where the scriptures had told us to stay away from, not to follow these people who are called rabbis. Let's see what the scriptures have to say about those who are described as being Sephardic. Turn to me, if you will, to 2 Kings chapter 17, verses 23 through 25, where it reads, "Until Yahuwah removed Israel out of his sight, as he had said by all his servants the prophets, so was Israel carried away out of their own land to Assyria unto this day. And the king of Assyria brought men from Babylon, and from Cutha, and from Ava, and from Hamath, and from Sepharviam, and placed them in the cities of Samaria, instead of the children of Israel. And they possessed Samaria, and dwelt in the cities thereof. And so it was, at the beginning of their dwelling there, that they feared not Yahuwah. Therefore Yahuwah sent lions among them, which slew some of them." So what is this scripture telling us? It tells us that the king of Assyria, when he invaded the northern kingdom of Israel, he replaced the people, the Hebrew Israelites who were there. He replaced them with people from Babylon, pagans, from Cutha, pagans, from Ava, pagans, and from Hamath, pagans, all pagan Gentiles. and from Sepharviam. Now, just in case there are those of you who noted that it says Sepharviam, which implies or uses the suffix aim, that implies multiple, more than one. And indeed, there were 2 Sepharvims. The point being is that the king of Assyria brought these people in, these pagan Gentiles in from these various places, and they put them in Samaria. They dwelt in the cities of Samaria, so that the Hebrew Israelites who once possessed that area of the northern kingdom called Samaria are now occupied by these pagan Gentiles. And we know that they're pagan Gentiles because the scripture says in verse 25 that they feared not Yahuwah. They feared not, with a meaning that they knew him not. They feared him not, they knew him not. And as a consequence of their arrogance, Father Yah sent lions in among them, which slew, killed, ate, destroyed some of these pagan Gentiles. Here we're looking at a map of the area in question. Let's take a look and see where some of these places are. Well, we are looking at the Mediterranean Sea to the left. Going straight across, we see Israel, Samaria, Jerusalem. Going up, we see one city called Sepharviam, and Ava, and Hamath. And going to the east, and crossing over the Euphrates River, we see Babylon and Katha. Going a little further, we see the Tigris River. And down to the southeast, we see the Persian Gulf River. And all of the Persian Gulf, not the Persian Gulf River, Persian Gulf. And all of this at one point was considered parts of Africa and is on the African continental shelf. Now, with regard to our scriptures at hand, at 2 Kings chapter 17, verse 24, we see that this king of Assyria, who was either one of or the collection of either Sargon I, Sargon II, and Sennacherib, would have been the kings involved at this time. So they said that he brought them from Babylon. We see Babylon just across the Euphrates River. And Katha. Katha is just across the Tigris River to the east of Babylon. And then we have Ava. Ava is over there towards on the coast of the Mediterranean Sea. Ava and Hamath and Sepharviam. Now remember what the scriptures say. The scriptures brought men from all of these places, pagan Gentiles, and they put them in Samaria instead of the children of Israel. The children of Israel were taken out and spread into those lands from which these other people came. They were dispersed into this area. But the land that is identified as Samaria is now under the possession and under the control of these people brought in from Assyria. Now let's take that which we have learned so far and apply that line upon line, precept upon precept to Matthew 10 verse 5. Now before verse 5, what is taking place is the Messiah is choosing his 12 disciples. He picks out all 12. And we're going to pick up on verse 5 of that process. In verse 5 we have, these 12 Yeshua sent forth and commanded them, saying, go not into the way of the Gentiles, and into any city of the Samaritans enter ye not, but go rather to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. Now when we look at this map, we can see where the Messiah was telling these 12 apostles not to go. He says, do not go into any city of the Samaritans. Do not go into the way of the Gentiles. Now, we have just learned that this area at this time is occupied by Gentiles that have been brought there by the king of Assyria. We see that there is a location called Jacob's Well, which is going to be very important in a minute. We see that there's a city called Sychar. And then to the north, we have Nazareth, and further north, we have the Canaanite city of Tyre. Now, to the south, we have the southern kingdom of Judea with Jerusalem, and we're shown the path that a person would normally take when they were going to Galilee. They would not go through Samaria. Why? Why would they not go to Samaria? Why would they take that long journey around Samaria, crossing the River Jordan twice to get to Galilee, when they could have just gone straight up north through Samaria? Why is this? Let's add to this Matthew 15, verses 22 through 28. And behold, a woman of Canaan came out of the same coast and cried unto him, saying, Have mercy on me, O Lord, thou son of David. My daughter is grievously vexed with a devil. Here we have a woman who is described as a woman of Canaan. She was a Canaanite. The Canaanites were the descendants of Ham. She is a Hamite. She is what we would call today a black woman, a dark-skinned, a melanated woman. This is a Hamite, a Canaanite. They are living in that area. Verse 23, But he answered her not a word, and his disciples came and besought him, saying, Send her away, for she cries after us. But he answered and said, I am not sent, but unto the lost sheep of the house of Israel. Now, where have we seen that before? I am not sent, but unto the lost sheep of the house of Israel. Didn't we see that earlier in Matthew 10, verse 5? I am not sent but unto the lost sheep of the house of Israel. So these people who he is encountering are not members of the lost sheep of the house of Israel, including this woman of Canaan, who obviously is not one. But there are other people throughout this land who are not members of the lost sheep of the house of Israel. And he answered her not a word. That goes a long way in showing you very clearly that the Messiah did not come here for everyone. He came here as a fulfillment of as the Passover lamb for the lost sheep of the house of Israel. That's why he came. I am not sent, but unto the lost sheep of the house of Israel. So we have this Canaanite woman living here in this area, along with those people who King Shalmaneser and others brought into this area from the Assyrian Empire. Remember, we read that the Hebrew Israelites had been taken out, and they were replaced with people from these other lands, these pagan lands. And here we see in Matthew 25 and 22, Matthew 15 and 22, there was this Canaanite woman who is clearly not a Hebrew Israelite. She is a Hamite. Picking up again at verse 25. Then came she and worshipped him, saying, Lord, help me. But he answered her and said, It is not meet to take the children's bread and to cast it to dogs. He just called this woman a dog. She and her people. What is this telling you about this sweet little Jesus that is taught by Christianity? Here you have the Messiah himself calling this woman a dog. And her people. Not just her, but her and her people, dogs. So why did he tell them not to go through Samaria? Because these lands are filled with people who he called dogs. A dog is an unclean animal. So at this time, he is still reflecting the Mosaic Law in that there were animals that were considered clean and unclean. And a dog is considered an unclean animal. And he is equating this woman and her people to dogs, unclean animals. That's why the Messiah told his disciples not to go into Samaria, not to go into any of these cities, because these are pagan Gentiles. But there's a plan, isn't there? There's a greater plan that even today some people don't see. Father Yah has made a way even for the Gentiles, but not at this time. First unto the Jew, then unto the Gentile. Let's go on with verse 27. And she said, Truth, Lord, yet the dogs eat of the crumbs which fall from their master's table. Here this woman breaks completely down. She acknowledges her low status as a dog, according to the words of the Messiah. An unclean animal. But yet she does what? She worships him. She acknowledges what he says is true. She's saying, yes, I may be of the dogs, but we dogs, we survive from that which falls off their master's table. Then the Messiah answers in verse 21. He says, Then Yeshua answered and says unto her, O woman, great is thy faith. Be it unto thee even as thou wilt. And her daughter was made whole from that very hour. So she became saved. The girl was saved. The daughter was saved through the faith of her mother, who was a Gentile. But because of her faith and her acknowledgement of who the Messiah was, the young lady was made whole. Again, I would say to you that this is but yet a shadow of things to come. That these Gentiles, some of these Gentiles are going to be allowed into the kingdom. If some of us like it or not, it's not up to you, because it's not your kingdom. The Messiah will let in whoever he chooses. So in this case, we have this woman in this region, along with those Sepharviam and those other people brought in from Assyria. This is why he's telling people, don't go there. Their time, the time of the Gentiles, has not come yet. First unto the Jew, then unto the Gentile. Now let's pick up on in the book of John, verses 4 through 6. When therefore Yeshua knew how the Pharisees had heard that Yeshua made and baptized more than John, though Yeshua himself baptized not, but his disciples, he left Judea and departed again into Galilee. And he must needs go through Samaria. Then cometh he to a city of Samaria, which is called Sychar, near to the parcel of land that Jacob gave to his son Joseph. Now Jacob's well was there. Yeshua, therefore, being wearied of his journey, sat thus on the well, and it was about the 6th hour. Okay, so what's going on here? Here we have the Messiah going on a journey from Judea to Galilee, from the south to the north. But in between those two, from where he is and his destination, is Samaria. But verse 4 says that it was necessary for some reason, he hadn't disclosed why, and he must needs go through Samaria, the same area where he told his 12 disciples not to go through. He told them not to go to any of the cities of the Samaritans. But here you see that Yeshua himself is going there. Okay? And he's going there, and he's entering into a city. He said he entered into a city of Samaria that is called Sychar. And here we see the city of Sychar in this region of Samaria where he told his disciples not to go. And here we can encounter this Jacob's well. And while we're here, just as an aside, pick up on this. They said that the Messiah was weary and he sat on the well, and it was about the 6th hour. Now think about something, and this is an aside, but if it was the 6th hour and he left, and the 6th hour began at sun, and the hour began at sundown, then 6 hours later would put him at somewhere around midnight or 1 a.m. in the morning. Now, do you really think all of this is taking place at midnight or 1 a.m. in the morning? Or did the day begin at sunrise, where this would be 12 or 1 o'clock in the afternoon? Which one makes more sense to you? Now, picking up with John 4, verses 7. There cometh a woman of Samaria to draw water. Yeshua saith unto her, Give me to drink. For his disciples were gone away unto the city to buy meat. Then saith the woman of Samaria unto him, How is it that thou, being a Jew, askest drink of me, which am a woman of Samaria? For the Jews have no dealings with the Samaritans. Okay, so here's the question. Why does it say that the Jews have no dealings with the Samaritans? Why is this? Including up to this time, the Messiah himself. Is it not because of the acknowledgement that these people are not Hebrew Israelites? These people are Gentile pagans brought in by the Assyrians, which we've already seen in 2 Kings. This is why they don't have any dealings with these people, because the true Hebrew Israelites know that these people who are now living in the land where their brethren of the northern kingdom used to live, they used to be the occupants of this land called Samaria, but they have been taken away and they have been replaced by these other pagan Gentile people. Let's pick up at verse 11. The woman saith unto him, Sir, thou hast nothing to draw with, and the well is deep. From whence then hast thou that living waters? Art thou greater than our father Jacob, which gave us the well, and drank thereof himself, and his children, and his cattle? The woman thinks that she is an Israelite. She thinks that she is related to Jacob. But in reality, she is a Gentile. She is a Gentile descendant of those who were brought into the land by the Assyrians. She thinks that Jacob was one of her ancestors who gave her and her family this well. So you see very clearly that we got a people coming up that believe and think that they are Hebrew Israelites when in reality they are not. Revelations 2:9, Revelations 3:9. So you see that these people who thought that they were Hebrew Israelites and are not, who were long before the Ashkenazis, and the Khazarians. They came much later. So this concept of trying to claim to be Hebrew Israelites when they are not is really nothing new, and it certainly did not start with these Khazarians. This has been going on for quite some time, trying to usurp the house of Jacob. Continuing on with verses 20 through 22. The woman goes on to say in verse 20, our fathers worshiped in this mountain, and ye say that in Jerusalem is the place where men ought to worship. Yeshua saith unto her, woman, believe me, the hour cometh when ye shall neither in this mountain nor yet at Jerusalem worship the Father. Ye worship ye know not what. We know what we worship, for salvation is of the Jew. Here we have it very clear that this woman believes that she is a Israelite. She said that our fathers worshipped in this mountain. She thinks that Jacob is one of her ancestors that built the well and gave it to her. But what did the Messiah say to her? He says, in more contemporary English, he says, you worship that which you do not know, what you do not understand. You worship ye know not what. He goes on to say, we know what we worship. Who's the we here that he's referring to? We Hebrew Israelites. We know what we worship. For salvation is of the Jews. Didn't say a thing about salvation being of the Gentiles. Salvation is of the Jews. Compare and contrast that with Revelations 2:9. I know the blasphemy of them which say they are Jews and are not, but are the synagogue of Satan. And this is what leads, and I went through all this to lead up into this guy, Maimonides, who was called Rabbi. Remember, Creator has told us about these rabbis, these scribes, and these Pharisees. Now, let's get back into this Maimonides, who is identified as a Sephardic, one of the people who were brought into these very lands that we've just gone over from these very people who think that they are Hebrew Israelites. Maimonides, Moses ben Maimon, aka Maimonides, saying that he is a Sephardic Jewish philosopher, is more than likely a descendant of these Sephardic people that were brought into Samaria by the Assyrians, and like others at the time and in the area thought he was a Hebrew Israelite. Revelation 3:9. Behold, I will make them of the synagogue of Satan, which say they are Jews, and are not, but do lie. Behold, I will make them to come and worship before thy feet, and to know that I have loved thee. Let's go back over that one part where it says, which say they are Jews and are not, but do lie. Now, to me, a person has to know the truth in order to lie. A person who doesn't know the truth and has no idea what it is, they may probably just be expressing their personal view of something. But someone who knows the truth and knows that what they are saying is not the truth, now that's a liar. And that's what scriptures calls these people. So this fella here, Maimonides, who calls himself Sephardic Jewish philosopher, Sephardic, coming from those same people that were brought into Samaria by the kings of Assyria. Okay, now let's get into the heart of this lesson. You know, the lesson is about the laws, the 613 laws. You know, the question is, where did these 613 laws come from? And pay close attention, because I think you're going to be surprised. You're going to be surprised about these 613 laws that even we true Hebrew Israelites have been espousing all of these years. Let's pick up on Deuteronomy chapter 33 of the KJV, verses 1 through 4. First one. And this is the blessing wherewith Moses, the man of Elohim, blessed the children of Israel before his death. And he said, Yahuwah came from Sinai, and rose up from Seir unto them. He shined forth from Mount Paran, and he came with 10,000s of saints. From his right hand went a fiery law for them. Yea, he loved the people. All his saints are in his hand, and they sat down at thy feet. Everyone shall receive of thy words. Moses commanded us in a law, even in the inheritance of the congregation of Jacob. Now we all know that Jacob would later change to Israel. So when the scriptures are talking about Jacob here, it is referring to Israel. Let's focus on verse 4. Moses commanded us a law, even the inheritance of the congregation of Jacob, Israel. This is where we're going to find, surprisingly, the source for these 613 laws. Now let us ask some questions rhetorically. Most of us have the answer to these questions. And this first question is, what is the Hebrew word for law? Is it not Torah? And how do we spell Torah in Hebrew? Is it not Tav, Va, Resh, He, or Tav, Wa, Resh, He? Most of us know that these letters in Hebrew have numeric values. The numeric value for the letter Tav is 400. For Wa it is 6. For Resh it is 200. And for He it is 500. When you take the values of these letters that spell out Torah, they come to a total of 611. So according to the Talmud and Rabbinic Judaism, to this total you add the first two commandments given by the Most High in Exodus 20 verses 3 and 4, which are, Thou shalt have no other Elohim before me, and Thou shalt not make unto thee any graven image or any likeness of anything that is in heaven above, or that is in the earth beneath, or that is in the water under the earth. So we have a total of 613 rabbinic laws according to the Talmud. Not the Torah, but the Talmud and Rabbinic Judaism. According to the Talmud, there are 248 positive commandments. These are the commandments that you are commanded to do. And then there are 365 negative commandments. These are the ones that you do not do. According to Talmudic Rabbi Simlai, the 365 negative commandments correspond to the number of solar days in the year. And the 248 positive commandments correspond to the number of members or organs in a man's body. One of the problems is that there are far more members and organs of a man's body than 248. And if we go by the biblical calendar, we can easily demonstrate that there are not 365 days in the biblical year. Strangely, the Talmud provides no listing of these 613 laws. But now that we know how they were derived, that's not surprising, since they're not a counting of the individual laws at all, are they? They're a result. This number is a result of the gematria of the word Torah. So men like Rabbi Maimonides and others created several lists. The problem is that these lists are not in agreement. They don't agree. These rabbis don't agree on what is and is not a law. They can't agree upon if where one law starts and another law ends. Clearly, there's confusion in the camp of these rabbis. In conclusion, the count of 613 is coming from Talmudic Rabbinic Judaism, derived in part from the Gematric evaluation of the word Torah, which gives us the value 611. To this we add 2 actual commandments, as we've indicated, coming from Exodus 20 verses 3 and 4, totaling 613. These 2 commandments from Exodus 20 verses 3 and 4 are the only actual commandments that make up the number 613. The rest being derived from the Gematric valuation of the word Torah, and not an actual count of the commandments. What did Scripture say? Revelation 3:9. Behold, I will make them of the synagogue of Satan, which say they are Jews, and are not, but do lie. Behold, I will make them to come and worship before thy feet, and know that I have loved thee. Shalom, Israel.